Hello and welcome back to Kevin Can't Play Today. I'm your host Kevin. Welcome back to our War Thunder Docuseries, the now weekly series I'm doing. And if you haven't guessed by now, I'm awful fond of the inglorious and ugly underdogs of the war. So today we're continuing our series with the British Hawker Hurricane, one of the most underrated planes in British aviation. So we'll get right into it. Sorry this video is coming out so late. It took a lot more time than I expected to research and get everything ready, including writing a script for once. So, yeah, I actually wrote a script. Yeah, well, here's the Hawker Hurricane Mark 1. This is the Mark 1 BC Hurricane. It's got a tail hook for carrier operations. Each of the Hurricane Mark 1s all started with 8 303 guns mounted in the wings. Later versions had all sorts of different configurations, from 8 to 12 303s. One version had two 20 millimeters and 4 303s. Another one had two 303s, but two 47 millimeter cannon. Yeah, all sorts of different configurations. So it was a very versatile aircraft. Now, a lot of people, like, oh, why do you like the Hurricane over the Spitfire? I get in this argument all the time, in-game even. People are like, why don't you take a Spitfire? Why do you have that piece of crap Hurricane? I'm like, well, because I like the Hurricane better. It flies better. It's tougher. It has combat flaps. I'm sure you guys heard me drone on about combat flaps before, but in terms of maneuverability, it's pretty vital. In fact, it's well known to be able to outturn about anything. Anyway, let's go into the history of it and take off. I think we'll actually go to the Mark IIB Trop or Tropical, if it loads. Just because this one has bombs. The 2B versions had bomb racks on them, which is very useful in Asia. This one also has 12, count them 12 303s, the standard 8, and then 2 more in the wings. So, well, this one, the Mark IIs also had an increased engine, a little bit more power. So let's get that load up and I'll start reading. The Hawker Hurricane is a low-wing cantilever monoplane outfitted with retractable undercarriage and an enclosed cockpit for the pilot, which was actually new, relatively new for the British at the time. Oh man, that engine's loud. I forgot. A clean single-seat fighter, it was developed to provide a competent combatant for aerial combat against the latest fighter designs that were emerging amongst the air services of the other powers of the era. The Hurricane was initially armed with an arrangement of 8 remotely operated wing-mounted Browning machine guns intended for conducting rapid engagements. The Hurricane was typically equipped for flying under both day and night conditions, being provided with navigation lights, Harley landing lights, complete blind flying equipment, and two-way radios. The Hurricane, being a single-seat fighter, a British single-seat fighter of the 1930s and 40s, was designed and predominantly built by Hawker Aircraft Limited for service with the Royal Air Force. It was overshadowed in the public consciousness by the Supermarine Spitfire's role during the Battle of Britain in 1940, but the Hurricane actually inflicted 60% of the losses sustained by the Luftwaffe in the engagement, and went on to fly in all major theaters of the Second World War. The Hurricane originated from discussions during the 1930s between RAF officials and British aircraft designer Sir Sidney Cam on the topic of proposed monoplane derivative of the Hawker biplane, which was the most common British fighter at the time. There was an institutional preference at the time for biplanes and a lack of interest from the Air Ministry, but Hawker chose to continue refining their monoplane proposal, which resulted in the incorporation of several innovations. Didn't get a direct hit. Oh well. Back to reading. Resulted in the incorporation of several innovations which became critical to wartime fighter aircraft, including a retractable undercarriage and more powerful engine in the form of the newly developed Rolls-Royce Merlin. The Air Ministry placed an order for Hawker intercept monoplane in late 1934, and the prototype Hurricane K5083 performed its maiden flight on the 6th of November 1935. In June of 1936, the Hurricane was ordered into production by the Air Ministry. It entered squadron service on the 25th of December 1937, just in time for Christmas. The manufacture and maintenance of the aircraft was eased by its use of conventional construction methods, which enabled squadrons to perform many major repairs themselves without external support. The Hurricane was rapidly procured prior to the outbreak of the Second World War in September of 1939, when the RAF had 18 Hurricane-equipped squadrons already in service. The aircraft was relied upon to defend against the numerous and varied German aircraft operated by the Luftwaffe, including dogfighting with the very capable Messerschmitt Bf 109 and multiple theaters of action. The Hurricane developed through several versions as bomber interceptors, fighter bombers, and ground support aircraft in addition to fighters. Versions designed for the Royal Navy were popularly known as the Sea Hurricane, with modifications enabling their operation from ships. Some were converted to be used as catapult launch convoy escorts, and by that we mean put on a freighter deck and fired off a catapult. By the end of production in July of 1944, 14,487 Hurricanes had been completed in Britain and Canada. During the era in which the Hawker Aircraft Company developed the Hurricane, RAF Fighter Command comprised just 13 squadrons, equipped with the Hawker Fury, the Hawker Demon, or the Bristol Bulldog. All biplanes furnished with fixed-wing wind propellers and non-retractable undercarriages. At the time, there was an institutional reluctance towards change within the air staff. According to aviation author Francis K. Mason, some senior figures were prejudiced against the adoption of monoplane fighter aircraft, while mid-level officers were typically approachable on the subject and designed concepts that made use of such configurations. In 1934, the British Air Ministry issued specification F.7-30 or /30 in response to demands within the Royal Air Force and for a new generation of fighter aircraft. Earlier, during 1933, British aircraft designer Sidney Cam had conducted discussions with both Major John Buchanan of the Directorate of Technical Development sorry, I got lost there. On a monoplane based on the existing Fury. Where's this? There we go. Let's go on a straight run real quick. Done. Didn't take long with 12 303s. Mason attributes Cam's discussions with figures within the RAF, such as Squadron Leader Ralph Sorley, as having provoked the specification, and some of his details, such as the preference for armaments being installed within the wings instead of the aircraft's nose, which was the primary way of doing things beforehand. Cam's initial submission in response to the order was the Hawker PV-3, which was essentially a scaled-up version of the Fury biplane. However, the PV-3 was not among the proposals which the Air Ministry had selected to be constructed as a government-sponsored prototype. After the rejection of the PV-3 proposal, CAM commenced work upon a new design involving a cantilever monoplane arrangement, complete with fixed undercarriage, armed with 4 machine guns, and powered by the Rolls-Royce Goshawk engine. The original 1934 armament specifications for what would evolve into the Hurricane were for a similar armament fitment to the Gloucester Gladiator, which I will do a video on later, as I love that plane too, and it's got an interesting history. 4 machine guns, 2 in the wings and 2 in the fuselage, synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. By January 1934, the proposal's detailed drawings had been finished, but these failed to impress the Air Ministry enough for a prototype to be ordered. CAM's response to this new rejection was to further develop the design during which a retractable undercarriage was introduced and the unsatisfactory Goshawk engine was replaced by a new Rolls-Royce design, initially designated as the PV-12, which went on to become famous as the Merlin engine. Words are hard, guys. In August 1934, a 1/10th scale model of the design was produced and dispatched to the National Physical Laboratory at Teddington. A series of wind tunnel tests confirmed the aerodynamic qualities of the aircraft were in order, and in September 1934, CAM again approached the Air Ministry. This time the Ministry's response was favorable, and a prototype of the quote-unquote interceptor monoplane was promptly ordered. In July 1934, a meeting chaired by Air Commodore Tedder, Air Ministry Science Office Captain F.W. Gunner Hill, presented the findings of his calculations that showed that future fighters must carry no less than 8 machine guns, each capable of firing at 1,000 shots a minute. Hill's assistant making his calculations was his teenage daughter. Of the decision to place 8 machine guns in the fighter, Keith says the battle was brisk and carried into very high quarters before the implementing authority was given. My branch had made out a sound case for 8 gun fighters, and if this recommendation had not been accepted, had we been content with half measures, it might have gone ill for us during the late summer of 1940, referring, of course, to the Battle of Britain. Present at the meeting was Squadron Leader Ralph Sorley of the Operational Requirements Branch of the Air Ministry, who played an important role in the decision. In November of 1934, the Air Ministry issued specification F.3/34, which called for a new fighter aircraft to be armed with a total of 8 guns. However, by this time, work had progressed too far to immediately modify the planned 4-gun installation of the original prototype. By January 1935, a wood mock-up had been finished, and although a number of suggestions for detailed changes were made, construction of the prototype was approved, and with the new specification was written around the design. In July of 1935, the specification was amended to include installation of 8 guns. In early 1936, the prototype was transferred to RAF Martlesham Heath, as British can name things, Suffolk, to participate in initial service trials under the direction of Squadron Leader D.F. Anderson. Sammy Roth, later to be the founding commandant of the Empire Test Pilot School, was the RAF test pilot for the Hurricane. His report was favorable, stating that the aircraft was simple and easy to fly and had no apparent vices, and proceeded to praise its control response. In the course of RAF trials, despite the Merlin engine proving to be problematic, having suffered numerous failures and necessitating several changes, enthusiastic reports were produced on the aircraft and its performance figures. The trials had observed the aircraft to possess a maximum level speed of 315 miles an hour at an altitude of 16,200 feet, a timed climb to an altitude of 15,000 from takeoff of about 5.7 minutes, and a stalling speed of only 57 miles an hour, only marginally higher than the Gladiator biplane. The last was able to achieve it using its flaps to go that slow. However, 57 miles per hour stall speed is very low stall speed. Yeah, which is very useful for bad runways, non-existent runways, like. Some interesting production notes. In June 1936, the Hurricane was formally ordered into production, the Air Ministry having placed its first order that month for 600 aircraft. On the 26th of June 1936, the type name Hurricane, which had been proposed by Hawker, was approved by the Air Ministry. An informal christening ceremony for the aircraft was carried out during the following month during an official visit by King Edward VIII? Yeah, the 8th. To Martlesham Heath, stupid British word. The key reason for the aircraft's appeal was its relatively simple construction and ease of manufacture. In comparison to the Supermarine Spitfire, it was significantly cheaper and involved less hours, requiring just over 10,000 man-hours to produce, as opposed to the just over 15,000 for the Spitfire, meaning the Hurricane could be produced by the rate of 3 Hurricanes for every 2 Spitfires. Also meaning that later on, this would mean that 3 out of every 5 British main fighters were Hurricanes or Spitfires. As a large-scale war was looking increasingly likely, and time was of the essence in providing the RAF with an effective fighter aircraft, it was unclear if the more advanced Spitfire would enter production smoothly, while the Hurricane made use of well-understood manufacturing techniques. This factor was equally applicable for its use within service squadrons as well, which were experienced in working on and repairing aircraft, whose construction employed the same principles as the Hurricane. And the simplicity of its design enabled the improvisation of some remarkable repairs in squadron workshops. A fabric-covered wing patterned upon traditional Hawker designs was initially adopted in order to speed up production, though a higher performing stress skin metal wig took place in late 1939. Upon the outbreak of the Second World War, over 550 Hurricanes had been produced, which had equipped a total of 18 squadrons, while a further 3,500 aircraft were on order. Overall, some 14,487 Hurricanes and Sea Hurricanes were produced in England and Canada. The majority of the canes, 9,986, in fact, were built by Hawker, who produced the type at Brooklands from December 1937 to October 1942, and in Langley from October 1939 to July of 1944. While Hawker's sister company, the Gloucester Aircraft Company, constructed about 2,750. The Austin Aero Company completed 300 Hurricanes. More on our side of the pond, Canada Car and Foundry was responsible for the production of 1,451 Hurricanes, almost all of which went to the Royal Canadian Air Force. And breakdown between the Hurricane and the Spitfire. As you know, as I've already stated, I vastly prefer the Hurricane over the Spitfire. It might not be as fast, but it is a lot more maneuverable and a lot more versatile. And it can take a heck of a beating. The advantage of the steel tube structure is that cannon shells can pass right through the wood and fabric covering without exploding. Even if one of the steel tubes was damaged, the repair work required was relatively simple and can be done by ground crew at the airfield. Instead of having to hack and weld, they just had to unbolt and bolt back on. Damage to a stress skin structure, such as used entirely by the Spitfire, required more specialized equipment to repair. The old-fashioned structure also permitted the assembly of Hurricanes with relatively basic equipment under field conditions. Oh crap, we only have 2 minutes of fuel left. Finish this paragraph and we'll land for a second. Crater hurricanes were assembled at Takoradi in West Africa and flown across the Sahara to the Middle East theater, and to save space, some Royal Navy aircraft carriers carried their reserve sea hurricanes dismantled into their major assemblies, which were slung up on the hangar bulkheads and deckhead for reassembly when needed. I mean, how easy is that? Yeah. Just build them when we need them. Alright, we'll take a little break here on the ground. Get some fuel. Get a couple more bombs. Might be able to take out that tank. Nope. Oh, crap, crap. Oh, that was good balance. Another reason I prefer tricycle landing here. Alright, let rearm and reload. In contrast, the contemporary Spitfire used an all-metal monocoque construction and was thus both lighter and stronger, but less tolerant to bullet damage. With its ease of maintenance, widely set landing gear, and benign flight characteristics, the Hurricane remained in use for theaters of operation where reliability, easy handling, and stable gun platform were more important than performance, typically in roles like ground attack. Alright, full of fuel. Oh hey, we didn't go in the cockpit earlier. Oh, we'll do that real quick. Take a look in here. Yep, this was the cockpit of the Hurricane. You know, pretty typical for a British fighter. Had that weird joystick that I'm not particularly a fan of, having sat behind the stick of one of these. I don't like that weird, you know, round ring. It does have its advantages, though. Yeah, you can place your hand on multiple points instead of just having it stuck in one position, which is kind of nice, but other than that, it's kind of awkward. Alright, where were we? One of the design requirements of the original specification was that both the Hurricane and the Spitfire were also to be used as night fighters. The Hurricane proved to be a relatively simple aircraft to fly at night, and shot down several German aircraft on night raids. From early 1941, the Hurricane was also used as an intruder aircraft, patrolling German airfields in France at night to catch bombers during takeoff or landing. And we have to cover the Battle of Britain a little bit. Since we're going to be talking about the Hurricane, we got to talk about the Battle of Britain. While the Hurricane was overshadowed by the Spitfire, the Hurricane was the workhorse. At the end of June 1940, following the fall of France, 31 of Fighter Command and 61 fighter squadrons were equipped with Hurricanes. The Battle of Britain officially lasted from the 10th of July until the 31st of October 1940. But the heaviest fighting took place between the 8th of August and the 21st of September. Both the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hurricane are renowned for their part in defending Britain against the Luftwaffe. Generally, the Spitfire would intercept the German fighters, leaving the Hurricanes to concentrate on the bombers. And ground orders. Got him. Nice. Sorry, got a little excited about that. I usually don't take out tags from 250-pound bombs. It usually takes a lot bigger bomb. But despite the undoubted abilities of the thoroughbred Spitfire, it was the workhorse Hurricane that scored the highest number of RAF victories during this period, accounting for 75% of the 2,739 German losses, according to Fighter Command, compared with only 42% by Spitfires. On the 8th of August, 1940, hurricanes of the number 145 Squadron were recorded as having fired the first shots of the Battle of Britain. The highest scoring of the Hurricane Squadron during the Battle of Britain, of the Hurricane Squadrons, Battle of Britain, was the number 303 Polish Fighter Squadron. This squadron also has the distinction of having the highest ratio of enemy aircraft destroyed to its own losses suffered. Now, mind you, the 303 was a unit of foreign nationals, British refugees, or refugees to Britain from Poland after the invasion of Poland. These guys were pretty badass. As a fighter, the Hurricane had some drawbacks. It was slightly slower than both the Spitfire 1 and 2 and the Messerschmitt Bf 109E, and the thicker wing profiles compromised acceleration, but it could outturn both of them. That is a tight turn. You want to see even better? Damn near pivot on a wingtip. You can see the difference between combat flaps and no combat flaps. In spite of its performance deficiencies against the Bf 109, the Hurricane was still capable of destroying the German fighter, especially at lower altitudes. The standard tactics of the 109s was to attempt to climb higher than the RAF fighters and bounce them in a dive. The Hurricanes could evade such tactics by turning into attack or going into a corkscrew dive. I'll show you one of those. 109 cannot follow that. Which the 109s with their lower rate of roll found hard to counter. If a 109 was caught in a dogfight, the Hurricane was just as capable of outturning the 109 as the Spitfire. I would argue even more so. Just the writing on that got weird. In a stern chase, however, the 109 could evade the Hurricane. Yeah, put on the speed and get the hell out of there. The Hurricane was a steady gun platform and had demonstrated its ruggedness, as several were badly damaged and returned back to base. The Hurricane's construction made it dangerous if it caught fire. The wood frames and fabric covering the rear fuselage allowed fire to spread through the rear fuselage structure easily. In addition, the gravity fuel tank in the forward fuselage sat right in front of the instrument panel, without any form of protection for the pilot. Many Hurricane pilots were seriously burned as a consequence of a jet of flame, which could burn through the instrument panel. This became of such high concern to Hugh Dowding that he had Hawker retrofit the fuselage tanks of the Hurricane with a self-expanding rubber coating called Linitex. If the tank happened to be punctured by a bullet, the Linitex coating would expand when soaked with petrol and seal it. From 10th of July to the 11th of August of 1940, RAF fighters from the fired at 114 German bombers and shot down 80, a destruction ratio of 70%. Against the 109, the RAF fighters attacked 70 and shot down 53 of these at a ratio of 77%. We're going to do a little bit of a trick. See if we can fly under this rail bridge, shall we? Done it. I don't know if I could have done that in the Spitfire, honestly. The Hurricane with the highest number of kills during the Battle of Britain was P3308, a Mark I flown between 15th of August and the 7th of October in 1940 by RAF auxiliary pilot Archie McKellar of 605 Squadron. He is credited with 21 kills, 19 of those in a Hurricane during the Battle of Britain. On the 7th of October, he is credited with shooting down 5, count them 5, Bf-109s. Not just bombers, other German fighters. Making him one of only 2 RAF pilots, the other Brian Carberry of New Zealand, to become an ace in a day during the Battle of Britain. McKellar has remained in relative obscurity in the Battle of Britain history, as he was killed in action one day after the date set by the War Ministry after the war as the official end date of the Battle of Britain. He was killed on the 1st of November 1940 while taking on a superior number of Bf-109s. Sad to say. The Hurricane also went on and performed valiantly in the Battle of France, the Battle of Dunkirk, North Africa, the defense of Malta, as a Russian fighter in defense of Russia, the Far East, and other places like South Africa and such. Where is my brakes? Why aren't I braking? Oh, I'm still in the air. That was a rough landing. What did I tell you about the low stall speed? I didn't even realize I was airborne. I thought I was already on the deck. I was going so slow. Alright, we're going to be switching out planes here real quick. Since we have a version, an aircraft carrier version, we'll be switching to that. To finish off the script of surviving aircraft of more than 14,500 hurricanes that were built, approximately 17, including 3 of the sea hurricanes, are in airworthy condition worldwide, although many non-flying examples are available in many different air museums worldwide. We're just going to do a quick takeoff and land from carriers. We don't do that very often. One reason is that there aren't too many planes that have carrier capability, and the other reason is because it's a pain in the butt. Real pain in the butt. You know, real pilots will tell you it's a pain in the butt. My great uncle Chuck flew various different aircraft in World War II, Pacific. He was a Marine Corps night fighter pilot, but he did do carrier traps, as he had to be trained for both as a Marine pilot. However, for carrier landings, the very low stall speed is a distinct advantage. The faster you're going, the harder it is to stick a landing. Going a little low. Good landing. A little jerky, but I will take that. That I would consider a successful carrier landing. Alright. Yes. Alright, thank you for joining me. I will be doing some actual gameplay here, and we'll be posting that right after this video. I found a couple neat little documentaries about the hurricane that I will be posting below. One's a very short. The first one I'll try and post is a very short interview with one of the pilots, and the other one's more of a longer documentary. But it's also got a lot of great footage and interviews. So I hope you enjoy those, and we'll see you next week with our next plane. Haven't decided what it's going to be yet, so it'll be a surprise. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you later.